So, without any further ado, let's go on to talking about darts. Darts are something that I don't usually think about teaching in an average class because I didn't realize that some people are struggling with darts. And there are so many different ideas about darts or ways to accomplish them. And some people come at it from a different direction. And some people backstitch, and some people never backstitch, and some people tie, and other people don't. So I'm going to give you what I know to be the best techniques that work efficiently, clean, and no pins, no basting, no fuss. So first, I want to talk about marking darts. What we learned maybe a couple years ago is that some people were not familiar with the old school tracing wheel and carbon paper. This would usually, you'd get like 4 or 5 sheets, probably navy, red, yellow, white, and they're carbon, and you apply them to the fabric using the tracing wheel. In today's world, there is not as readily available, and some of the products we've learned from some of you don't work as well. So we're going to have a link in the comments that will give you how to get to Susan Calgi's site. Susan Calgi is a couture teacher, and she sells a really nice quality of paper that can be used with the tracing wheel, and it comes in 4 colors, and her sheets are really big, so if you had to mark very long seams or something, it would be, I think they're, what are they, 26 by 39. So, and I'm going to tell you, you only have to buy them once, they'll last you forever, because just look at these. This is what was in my stash. There's a Talon and a Dritz. This one costs 90 cents. This one costs 75. Today's price is $32 plus shipping. So that's how old these are, but they've lasted, and every time I need one, I just go and I pull it out. So, but as I said, some of you have told us what's available maybe at your local chain store uh, just wasn't the same quality. So I'll just show you quickly how you use a tracing wheel. So this is our fashion fabric. This is the wrong side of our fabric. If we were going to mark 2 things at once, we could put this folded this way between the 2 layers. So if you're marking 2 darts at once, but we're only going to mark one here. So I only need 1 layer facing the fabric, and then my little dart pattern. Obviously, it'd be your bodice or something. And then you just take this little wheel, and if you can see, it has these little tiny points on it. Those little points cause dotted line to appear on the fabric where you need to stitch. So you want to be accurate and stay right on that line and give it some pressure. And there you have it. So this is the old school way of marking darts. And I will tell you that many of people in my age category were taught to trace all their seam allowances. So on the patterns back in the 60s and before, the seam allowance was marked on the pattern. And in each envelope, you only got one size. So the seam allowance would be marked on the pattern, and then they would trace their seam allowance. So they could sew perfectly accurate seams. And they would know where, if they needed to adjust, they could see that difference really easily by marking all those. Although for me, it's just way a lot of tedious work. But anyway, we have our dart marked that way. Now, the way that I generally mark a dart, unless for some reason I needed to do this, is I would mark my dart by, where's my little scissors? Oh, I didn't bring scissors. I'll use the rotary cutter. So let's say that my dart pattern, let's say this is the pattern. So I would make a little nip in the edge of the fabric. Don't use a cutter, use the scissors. But I would make little nips right here so I could line them up. So that would be the and fold, and that's in effect the same thing as this dart, okay? Then to mark that center of the dart, you have a couple of options. One would be to put a pin or something right through that hole while it's still where you need it to be. And then using a chalk or any kind of erasable marker, you'll make a dot right where that pin was. Now we know we're going to sew from here to here. Now, if you need a stitching line and you don't have the carbon, you could do this. You could line this up and mark it with your chalkener. And now you have that line to sew on as well. Okay. Now in the garment factory, we don't draw lines. All the operator is going to get is the little clips on the end here. And believe it or not, there's a hole at the end of the dart. Now what's really important here is that if you're going to use this method, that your hole ends up inside of where the stitching is supposed to end. Instead of marking right at the tip where I did with the dot, now I'm going to mark just shy of the tip. And I'm going to use a sewing machine needle and I'm going to push it all the way through the fabric. Now you see I have a hole. Can you see that, Bren?
Really? I'm in as far.
Let me see. I hold this up a little bit. Okay, the hole is right here. Okay, so when I take that to the sewing machine and I fold it and I grab those two little clips together and then I fold it on that dot, I know right where to sew. And if you make a lot of darts, you don't need to do anything more than this, and then you can just do your stitching. So that's the way it's done in production. But if you don't make 100 darts a day, I suggest that you do some of the marking that I showed you how to do. But I just thought it'd be kind of fun to show you how it's done. And in the garment factory, when they mark them, obviously they don't use a sewing machine needle. They have another apparatus. But if you've ever tried to move a dart on a ready-to-wear garment, chances are you found that little hole. That little hole will not ravel. It has not cut any of the fibers, but it's permanently pushed them aside to create that little bit of a hole just to mark it so that you can sew it. So that's the industry marking. All right, so now let's talk about stitching of darts. And I've had coincidentally, several people comment. One in person and a couple of emails about, would you please show us how to do a dart? I have trouble with darts. So I don't know what all the troubles are, but I do know some of the key pointers, and then we'll talk about what kind of troubles you might be having. So first of all, where are darts supposed to be? Well, we use darts in order to create uh, a rounded effect. And that dart position is very important for a flattering look. So that dart position, and I don't know if we can see here, but you'll measure from your apex, which is the center of the bust, and you want the end of your dart either a vertical or a horizontal dart to be 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch from that point on your bust. You may buy a pattern and you go to put the muslin on, and this dart is way over here on you, or it's way over here on you. You've got to move that dart so it's directly underneath your apex. Having it over here is going to misshapen the garment and make you look misshapen. So that's the first thing you want to do if you're making a new pattern. You're going to want to do a muslin to make sure, because most people I've helped have had to move this dart. If you're bigger busted than the average person who wears that size, chances are you're going to have to move it. If you're smaller, chances are you're going to have to move it. And nobody's just exactly perfect. So that's what you want to know, so that it gives you a nice, and here's one with the only the vertical dart. This is our um everybody's shirt with the vertical dart, and then this one is the everybody's tunic with that vertical dart. And I now, if you look at these darts, if I was going to make for this person, I'd move these darts in about a half inch. They're a little bit too far over for her. But she's just a mannequin, so we don't care. But for yourself, you want to make sure they're pointed at the right place. And then the garment will hang properly. Now, how to stitch the dart. This is where I think some of you are having trouble. When you stitch a dart, you want to stitch the dart, and we're going to say that this is a, let's say that this dot right here is the end of the dart. And I am on the fold right here. I have a bet. This one is a little deceiving, so let's go to this one. As you can see, I am hitting the fold a stitch and a half to 2 stitches. Not just a half a stitch, not just one stitch. You want this to be a very gradual, smooth transition at the end, so it lays perfectly flat on your bust. Because if you don't, you will get a bump. So this is and you'll see in the newsletter, this was titled, Don't Make a Quick Left Turn, because that's what Margaret would always tell everyone. If you're headed here and you see that you're not going to make it, the only alternative here is take it out and go back and approach it again, because you do not want to make this quick left turn. And I'm going to show you exactly why you don't want to make a quick left turn. All right. Here is a dart that's transitioning beautifully on this side. Let me see. How's that look? So this would maybe this is a skirt, and this is where the widest part of the hip is down here. So it'll lay smooth across that hip. Here's one that was not that made the quick left turn. All right, and this is what happens when you make the quick left turn. You're going to have this dimple at the end, and that is not what you want on your bust or your hips, to have this little dimple. So if you're getting those little dimples or tucks that won't lay smooth and just pop out like that, you're not getting a smooth, clean transition. So do not stitch your dart. Let's see. Can you see this one? Do not stitch your dart like this. You see it sort of curves? No. So, and all it takes is a few little 6 or 8 inch squares of fabric to practice and make a few darts until you start to really get it, and you just end up on the end of that smooth fold. Now, if you're using a 3 stitch, maybe you're only going to get a stitch and a half on that fold. If you're using a 2, you're probably going to get 2 or 3 stitches right there at the end that line right across onto that fold, and then you'll have that perfect smooth dart. So the most important thing is getting them positioned properly on the garment before you stitch them, marking them the best way that works for you, and then stitching accurately so that you get right to that point without any variation and right straight off. Now, the final thing, and I put it in the newsletter, is to not, so many people will say to tie these threads at the end of the dart. What we do is we just keep stitching. And this is way too small for you to see right now, but it's all stitched together. And then there's the little tail at the end here. Can they see that?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is how you'll see in all your ready to wear a little tail of stitch threads and a cut, and then cut it off. It will not come out. It will not unravel. In my 60 plus years of sewing, I've never had a dart come out. And I bet you've never had a ready to wear dart come out. And that's the way they're done. So no need in spending that fussy time to make a long tail and tie a knot at the end. Do not start at the end of the dart. That's not a good place to start. And it's not a good idea to back up either. Even if you were to turn around so that you made sure you stayed on top of the same stitching, it's just going to be too bulky for most garments. And this is the fine tip of a dart. So the last thing you want to do is add some bulk to that, because again, we want that very smooth transition. So, take a little square. This is, we always use Kona cotton in our samples, but anything that you've got in a firm woven, and do a couple samples and try what I said. Just, I know you think I'm crazy because a lot of people do. You just keep on stitching, the fabric's off and you're still stitching. And you don't normally do that. And you're thinking, oh, the machine will jam up. Nope, you'll be just fine. So give that a try. And I think that's all I have on darts, but I'm open to questions about darts.
Yeah, I got the wrong